Hello, everyone. Welcome to What Do You Believe? I'm happy and excited to have you, Michael, with us. Thank you for your questions
Thank
and all
you.
your comments.
Mhm.
And Dr. Nagy Eskandar, thank you for being here.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Nagy Eskandar is a medical doctor and he's the fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons of England. And he practiced surgery for 25 years in the UK.
That's right.
We've been talking about the Ark.
Yes,
Really big book.
It
We've been
is.
talking about the dimensions and how big it is.
I know. And I'd like really to repeat the dimension 300 cubit by 50 by 30. And these dimensions are very important for the stability and for the size of the ark. And the picture I would like to put on the screen again is the size of the ark in a neighborhood. It's like an American football pitch and 3-story high. And you can see it is a big, big structure. Sometimes when look at the children Bibles, we find the ark represented like this little boat. This is really, what can I say?
Superficial.
Very superficial and very dangerous, actually, Michael. Very dangerous. I'll tell you why. Because it gives the impression to the little kids that the ark was little boat and the giraffes are looking at the top and the monkeys are jumping and Noah is not knowing how to deal with all of that. This really cannot stand the geology of the flood, the fountains of the deep and the rain. That will turn upside down very quickly. And all the creatures inside this ark will die. So when we give that impression to the young people in Sunday schools and other places of the ark like this, when they grow up and study some geology and some physics, they say, oh, they were telling us stories. They are just telling us myth. They are telling us things which never happened because it cannot happen. But when we look at the text tells us the dimensions that can survive the ark, the ark that can survive the flood with all the forces of the flood that we'll discuss as we go along. So this picture really is wrong. And I encourage people to take it off really when they see it in any publication. I'm responsible for that. Because it gives the wrong impression, because these people stayed in the ark for 371 days. And there is a book called Visibility Study of Noah's Ark, talk about the ventilation, the lighting, the food, the waste.
For almost a year.
Yes, exactly. So, and this is based on the biblical description, which is very accurate. It's not taken from any other civilization or any other culture, because the other cultures are describing the flood completely different. But this one is describing it in detail and describing it accurately with dates and measurements. I think that really makes us respect what is written in Genesis 1 to 11. But we'll continue our discussion. So, the Korean study, they were studying 3 dimensions: the comfort of people on the board of the ark and the animals, the strength, because there is the fountains of the deep, and the stability of the ark. And they did this study, and they found that the stability of the ark with this dimension mentioned in the Bible, the ark can stand all these problems of the flood. And we'll talk about the year of the flood, because it's not always these volcanic eruptions happening. There were quiet areas and areas which are more active. We will come to that again in our discussion. So in this diagram before us, tests show that it would have been stable in 200 feet, that's 65 meters high waves. That's massive. Greater waves than these would not occur in the open seas. That's obviously an open sea because all the boundaries were just covered by water. So it's like a very big open sea. So they discovered that 65-meter wave is the highest that you can reach in an open sea. And they put the model, obviously. We didn't find the ark. The ark is not found at all. And all the missions that went to try to find it, they failed. And they came with some conclusion. We found a piece of wood and we think it is the ark. But the ark was not found.
I'm really happy that you mentioned that, because there's some books and articles. We found it here and there. And
No, scientifically, Michael, no, it was not found. And we can confirm that till 2018, when we are recording this, it's not found. And we don't expect it to be found, but I can't forecast the future, obviously. But because it's wood and it will decay.
Of course.
And there is no value of finding an ark at all. But the description of the ark, they did the replica to show the events of the flood are true, and the ark can sustain life for that length of time. So the ark can be a stable structure, and it can accommodate life, and life can continue, because the purpose of the ark is to keep seed after the end of the flood. So the ark has to fulfill that function. Right, now we'll come to the animals that coming to the ark. And the big question is how many of them can come? We have really millions of organisms now. I see by million, I am talking of bacteria and viruses and all of that, okay? So how many animals and birds came to the ark? Because remember, we don't make, Noah didn't have to take any marine animals at all, because they are all in the water.
They're already there.
Yeah, so he doesn't have to have a fish tank in the ark, because all the marine animals, and that's why in the fossil, if you remember, 95% of the fossils are marine animals, because they were outside the ark and they got fossilized with the mud and the temperature and the pressure and all the volcanic eruptions that were taking place. Some of them survived the flood, and that's why we have marine life nowadays, because some of them survived. And there are mechanisms and reasons why they survived. Now, let us go back to the Bible, because I believe the Bible is a true book and the description is very accurate. The Lord asked Noah to take birds, 7 couple, according to their kind. And this is a very important word. And the cattle according to their kind, after their kind, as we can see on the screen now. And the Lord will bring these animals and birds to Noah. Noah doesn't have to go out in the fields to find them. And some people will say, okay, how he can go to Australia and America to get the animals there? The answer, there was no Australia and America at the time. The earth was one continent, and that is even the secular geologists believe that, called Pangea. And the tectonic plates of this one piece of land were divided, we believe, in mainly during the flood year, because of the volcanic eruptions and the subterranean water. It caused the initial separation.
During the flood year?
Mostly during the flood.
And what year do you believe the flood occurred?
That was about 1650 or 30, yeah, okay. of the creation.
So that time, the land started to
to split, yeah. There is something called the continental shift and continental split. Continental shift is the slow movement of the tectonic plates. And that's what we can observe now. We believe in tectonic or geological catastrophic event that caused a split of this, an act, and then there is a movement still happening in the tectonic plates.
Okay, I disagree with you. I just want to know your thoughts, your idea.
That's idea. You can highlight that. That's not a problem at all. Okay, so Noah didn't have to go and to other parts of the world to get the animals. The Lord is bringing the animals to him and the birds to him. And the other thing is, in the New Testament, we read that Noah was preacher of righteousness. So people say, did he have all this language to preach all over the world? He doesn't need all of this language, because the splitting of the language happened at the Tower of Babel after the flood by about 300 years. So there was only one language. The other problem is how he could manage to speak to so many people. The answer is by building the ark and this big project.
The people started to come by
and people start to ask, even if they don't visit him at the location of the building the ark, they start to ask why Noah is building this big, massive ship.
So was the people concentrated in this area, or
yes.
they were?
No, because as I said, it's only one continent at the time, and they were concentrated in an area. We don't know exactly where it is, because after the flood, everything changed.
So why did God? So why was the flood universal then?
Yeah, because because in order to achieve the the killing of all the people outside the ark. It has to be universal, because if it is a piece of land, say like Africa, just an example, and people are concentrated on the north part of Africa, for example, this is not reality, just an example. So if the flood is local in north of Africa, people can immigrate to the area where there is no flood.
No immigration, it happens suddenly. So they won't have time to immigrate.
No. It's 40 days or 40 nights of start of the flood. The flood is a process. So they can have enough time to immigrate. That's not a problem at all, because the starting of the...
So the people was concentrated in one area.
One area, we don't know where it's exactly.
Where it is, but when they all come by to Noah, that means that they were close to each other.
They were close, that's right.
When a huge event right away has happened, the windows of the heavens
were opened and the fountains
right
of the
away,
deep.
And the fountains came by from the earth.
Exactly.
So there was no time for anybody to do anything.
You are assuming it happened day one. The flood took 371 days. So during the initial part of the flood, people can move and can go somewhere else. So the people who are in the ark, and the ark didn't float day one. The ark was built on a solid ground, actually. It's not in the sea. Right? And when the water increased, it started to float. So it floats between what we think day 40 and day 151. That's the period we think that's when it was floating, and then it rested after 150 days. And the land was soft, so they didn't come out immediately.
So the main reason of the flood is for God is to remove all the lives from the earth, every single life.
Outside the ark.
Outside the ark.
God produced his judgment, which was fair judgment, but at the same time, he provided a way of salvation through the ark.
So why did, after the mission
before your last question, I just want to add that we talked about this before, and you said if it was just a local flood, then he could have just told Noah and his children to move somewhere else. We don't need an ark. So that's another way to think about if you have an ark and if you're going to do all that, because if we're talking about God and he knows what's going to happen, then you don't need an ark. If you're going to build an ark for years or however long it took to build an ark, then you don't need it unless it's complete. It's a complete flood all over
global,
the whole
exactly.
global flood. And we're going to come back to your question, but we'll just take a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with the flood.
Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like a copy of this episode, please call 714-709-4300 or email us at info@alkarmatv.com. You can also visit our website at www.alkarmatv.com. Also, you can write to P.O. Box 3610, Seal Beach, California 90740.
Welcome back to What Do You Believe? We've been talking about the flood, the ark, and the animals.
Exactly. So the animals will come according to their kind. So if there are 200 types of dogs, God will not bring 200 types of dogs to Noah. He will bring the wolf with the genetic pool material that will differentiate into any number of dogs after the flood ends and after they will repopulate the earth. So that is important to understand the word according to their kind, because this is how was it described in chapter 1 in Genesis. God created the plants according to its kind. God created the animals according to its kind. The birds according to its kind, the fish the marine animal according to its kind. Very important to understand this very important word. Yes.
Sorry, Doctor. Sure. Sorry, Michael. I have to ask now. So about the animals. So we talked about natural selection. We talked about mutation. Was there any selection that part, natural or intelligent selection, where we're gonna say, we don't want these animals anymore. We're just gonna, deal with these animals, or just. It's more convenient to have those animals with was that happening?
Yeah, this is a period of about 1600 years from creation, and there was no North Pole and South Pole, and there was no other continents at the time. So the natural selection is a process which can happen immediately after the fall, actually, and the mutation happened after the fall. So the natural selection acting on some mutations, probably some of them disappeared. We don't know. But the kind that God created and wants to keep are there. So the head of the family is there. The distribution, we don't know because we don't have information to tell us what it is. And when there is no clear text, I really don't want to put my own views or views of anybody else, because I respect the text so much. I believe this is the boundaries which will help us to understand the whole event, not the whole story, because it is event. So the kinds, God created according to its kind, according to its kind, according to its kind. And when he brought the animals and the birds to Noah, according to its kind, according to its kind, according to its kind. Now, when they built the Noah's Ark, the replica of Noah's Ark in Cincinnati by Answers in Genesis, they did massive study in the records of fossil records and lots of information in biology, really, to see what is the kind. And they came to the conclusion of this picture now before us. We have first the kingdom, like animal kingdom and plant kingdom. And then the phylum, that is chordate and non-chordate, people with a spinal cord and no spinal cord. And then the class, mammals and non-mammalians. And then the order of the kingdom of animals, and then the family, and then the genus, and then the species. We think that the word kind applies to the level of the family. In most cases, there are some exceptions to that. So the word kind is called min, and this is the level of the family of the animal kingdom. That applies to the plants, applies to the birds, applies to everybody else. So when God brings, he brings the head of the family to Noah so they can repopulate the earth after the end of the flood.
And as we talked about genetics, you explained that that head of the family has enough genetic code that can split up or move into the different kinds inside that kind.
Exactly. So it's only kinds of dogs. There is no cat can change to be a dog, but there are many different types of dogs. So yes, according to kinds. So there is boundaries that God created in his creation with genetic pool at the top to differentiate. So we believe in natural selection, we believe in mutation as we discussed before, and now we are looking at the kinds that the Lord brought to Noah. Now, what was the depth of the flood? We read in Genesis 7:11, and I always refer to the word of God actually because this is really the reference point in understanding all these events. It speaks about 600 years of the life of Noah. And in the second month, on the 17th day, this is very accurate. This is not a myth. This is not a story. This is not an example. This is not a parable. This is a reality with dates and very accurate dates. His year 600, and we'll talk about the years between Adam and Noah. They lived in hundreds of years. After the flood, the life was limited, but that's another topic. But just to know that 600 years, it doesn't mean a very old man who cannot really walk. It's not like that. He's 600 years, but fit and strong and able to do lots of things. Because I was giving this lecture and the chap said, I'm a 1/10 of Noah's life, and really I can't look after my house. So I said, this is a different sort of physiology, because the early man was perfect, was made in God's image, was healthy. Adam didn't have to wear glasses like myself, because his sight was 100% right. 20/20 as they call it. So,
and maybe it was designed as an eternal being too. So it's like before sin,
exactly.
There wasn't a plan of like you're that's it for you. You can't grow anymore.
Exactly. So because we have an impression, actually, David, of the early man as a primitive man living in the cave and all of that. This is the evolution way of thinking.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's why.
Exactly. But the biblical description of man is perfection at the beginning, and then we are declining
because of the sin.
Because of the sin and the decay that happened, and the death that came, the physical death, not the spiritual.
Declining physically, you mean, or generally?
Yes, in a sense, yes, we are. But the thing is, God enabled us to know more knowledge about bacteria and the infection, so we can control that. which allows us to live longer, but longer in from tens of years, not hundreds
So
of
also
years.
technology, I mean, we've came a long way, so I
Oh,
don't know
yeah.
if we're declining or we're still, you know, in the...
Let me just explain this little bit, because the early man managed to build the pyramids, and the big pyramid is more than 2 million stone, and some of them are more than 1 ton. And they cut them in one particular place, transported them, and put them accurately with no defect at all. The Karnak temple in Egypt, when they build the high dam, they have to move it to another place. And with all the technology, they couldn't get it absolutely right, because the light of the sun will shine on the statue of Ramses on his birthday, and they didn't get that right exactly. So the early man was very, very knowledgeable, both in the physical world and then some astronomy as well, because some people believe that the big pyramid is built with some astrological orientation as well, with some angles. And in Britain, where I live, there is something called Stonehenge at the and this is massive stones, and they are built in columns and covered. How they lifted them up, what machinery they used, we don't know.
I have
Yes.
a question here
Sure.
about this. You said that death came by to the earth by the sin, or
Yes.
to the sin. That came to the man. What about the animals and the planets?
Yes. Because sin entered the world, it affected everybody in the sense of, because Adam and Eve were the head of the creation. With their fall, sin entered into the world, and the decay and the mutation and disease and
Why?
illness.
Why did it enter to the animals and to the planets? They did the sin, and they have to get punished.
Absolutely. But the thing is, sin is like a disease entering into the world, affected everybody. I'll give you a little example. A few years ago, there was something called mad cow disease, right? It affected just a group of cows. But they have to cull all the cows, even the healthy ones, to eradicate this problem. This is a very faint example, but I'll come to the sin. Yeah. When sin entered the world, because man and woman were the head of creation, and God said, the day you eat from the tree of good and evil, dying you shall die. So there was death as a physical death and a spiritual death. Why all the creation is affected by this? Because the head of creation became corrupt. So everything else was corrupt. And the Apostle Paul describes that in Romans chapter 8, saying, the creation groans, awaiting the revelations of the sons of God. And according to the Bible, we live in a fallen world, in animal and plants and layers of the earth and man, and we are awaiting the second coming, where there will be a new heaven and a new earth, and there will be no sin in that new heaven and new earth.
Okay, my question is that since God created everything perfect, the man, animals, and the planets, and all other creatures that above and under the earth, and the sin entered to the man, and supposedly the other creatures are perfect.
They are perfect, but they don't have free will. But the one at the top with the free will spoiled it for all. Right? The one at the top, Adam and Eve, with the free will.
So they are responsible for themselves.
But responsible for themselves, but they were made on the image of God, and they have dominion on all the earth.
Right.
You haven't been with us when we discussed dominion and man. But the thing is, God created Adam and Eve at the top, and they are the masters of the whole thing. The whole thing was built for them. When sin entered into the world, the whole thing collapsed. The whole thing collapsed. That's why there will be a new heaven and a new earth. It's not repairing what has done before. And let me just explain something, because you mentioned the plants. Plants are different from the living animals and living birds and humans, because plants are packages of energy to be used as source of food. So Adam and Eve in the garden, they can't kill a chicken and have it for dinner. That's not allowed before the sin. They eat plants and fruit. And you read in chapter 1 in Genesis, and that's how Bible is very accurate. From verse 29 to 31, God is saying, I have given you the plants as a source of food for you and your descendants, and for all the birds, and for all the creeping animals. So how accurate the Bible is. is telling us the source of food is not killing animals. Killing animals and eating them happened in the covenant that God made with Noah and his descendants after the flood. In chapter 9, the Lord said, I'm allowing you to eat the animals after you shed their blood, and that will be given to you as food, as I have given you the plants initially.
And Doctor, like we always, or sometimes we discuss things in just physical matter, and unless you believe in materialism, that we're only matter, there's the soul, there's the spirit, there's the connection between everything that's living, and so there's a God that is in everything that's living. So for us to separate, be like, Michael, I have no connection to you, then you're just a physical thing and I'm a physical thing, and this is not happening.
So
then our conversation does not even exist. Well, I mean, I'm not going to go into details of like what has what in terms of that, but what I'm saying is, can we think in the different dimensions? Can we think in other things? Because it's easier for us to just think in materialistic things that we can see and we can feel. But there's a lot of other, angles and different things. But no, I mean, no. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying that I'm just saying the idea of like we always need to think about different angles, different idea, not just the physical part where you're separate than me, but I think we're connected. Just having this conversation, we have a connection that you can't just ignore it.
Sure. Let me just comment on the animals. They have a breath of life. They have a breathing, yes, and they can die and they can decay. Right? They don't have eternal soul like us, but they have life, which is the breath that comes through the nostrils. And actually, the kind of animals that God brought is with nostril, with breathing, animals that can breathe, right? So, yes, they have a life which is different from ours because our souls are eternal, because we have the freedom of choice.
But for everybody, what is the source of life? Where it's all coming from, where it's all going to. So, I mean, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of answers. There's a lot to discuss. Thank you, guys. We'll keep talking. We'll keep going. C.S. Lewis said, you must be asking which door is the true one, not which pleases you best. So think about it. Ask yourself, what do you believe? We'll see you next time.